3 weeks ago, the report listed 3 operator ID numbers: my own, Martin's, and Diane's. Richard's was not there. I generated the report again later that morning. The result did not change. I checked it once more in the afternoon, after the queue had cleared and the system had synced. The list remained the same. 3 operator IDs. Richard was sitting at his desk when I checked. He was reviewing a variance form. He had coffee in his usual mug. He wore the same gray cardigan he wears most days. I've worked in the municipal licensing department for 6 years. My role is processing permit applications, logging case assignments, and maintaining the digital workflow system. There are 4 of us in the department. Martin handles field compliance. Diane manages approvals and renewals. Richard supervises special cases. I process the intake queue. The building is older than most of the software we use. The break room smells like burnt coffee. The lights hum constantly. We follow the same schedule every week. Monday is application day. Tuesday through Thursday, we process backlog. Friday is reconciliation. The system generates a weekly report that lists all activity by operator ID. It's automatic. It's been automatic since before I started. The report counts active operators. It pulls from login data. If someone doesn't log in during the week, they don't appear. But Richard logs in every morning. I see him do it. His screen lights up. His calendar populates. He opens the case queue and begins working through it. I open the master operator registry. It's maintained by IT. It lists everyone with system access. There were 3 names: Martin Holloway, Diane Ruiz. My own name. No Richard. I minimized the window. I looked across the room. Richard was still there. He was typing. His fingers moved across the keyboard in the same steady rhythm they always do. He paused. He sipped his coffee. He continued typing. I returned to the intake queue. I processed 2 applications without issue. I updated their status. I archived the attachments. I waited for the next item to load. The system responded at its usual speed. Nothing required clarification. I pulled the intake log from 2 weeks prior. There had been 11 applications that week. I remembered because one of them required a manual override. Richard had handled it. I had signed off on the approval. I checked the log entry. The entry did not include him. I hadn't processed that application. I remembered watching Richard handle it. I remembered him calling me over to confirm a zoning discrepancy. I remembered signing the override form. The record showed the task as completed. I checked 3 more entries from that week. All of them were attributed to Martin, Diane, or me. None of them listed Richard. But I could recall Richard working on at least 2 of them. I had seen him print the confirmation sheets. I had seen him file them in the cabinet by the door. I opened my email. I searched for messages from Richard. There were none. I searched for messages to Richard. There were none. I searched for his name in the subject line. Nothing. I opened the sent folder. I filtered by the last 6 months. I knew there had been exchanges. I remembered forwarding him a compliance memo in August. I remembered receiving his feedback on a procedural update in September. I searched for the word compliance in August. 17 results. None mentioned Richard. None were addressed to him. I searched for procedural in September. 9 results. The update I remembered had been sent only to Martin and Diane. I checked the shared calendar. Monday staff meetings were listed. Department updates were listed. Maintenance windows were listed. There were no entries created by Richard. There were no events assigned to him. I stood up. I walked to the break room. I made tea. I stood by the window and looked at the parking lot. Richard's car was there. It's a blue sedan. It was parked in the same spot he always uses. When I came back, Richard was standing by the filing cabinet. He was holding a folder. He glanced at me and nodded. I nodded back. He returned to his desk. I sat down. I opened the personnel directory. It's a PDF updated quarterly by administration. I scrolled to our department. 3 names. I closed the file. I checked my desk calendar. It still had Richard's handwriting on it. 2 weeks ago, he had written a note reminding me about a scheduling conflict. The note was still there. The ink was blue. His handwriting slants slightly to the right. I returned to the intake queue. There were 5 applications waiting. I assigned 2 to Martin. I assigned 2 to Diane. I assigned 1 to myself. There was no option to assign anything to Richard. I checked the drop-down menu. It listed 3 operators. I refreshed the page. Still 3. Richard was less than 10 feet away. He was on the phone. I could hear his voice. He was speaking to someone from the zoning office. He was confirming a permit adjustment. His tone was patient. He repeated the reference number twice. I opened the access log. It tracks every entry to the office floor. You need a badge to get in. The system records the badge ID and timestamp. I filtered by the last 2 weeks. Martin's badge, 47 entries. Diane's badge, 52 entries. My badge, 44 entries. No other IDs. I looked at the door. Richard had entered this morning. I had been standing near the elevator when he came in. He had scanned his badge. The light turned green. The door unlocked. He walked through. I checked this morning's log. 3 entries. Martin at 8:03. Diane at 8:12. Me at 8:17. Richard had entered at 8:09. I was certain. I had checked my phone right after. It was 8:11. I minimized the window. I stared at my desk. The hum of the lights felt louder than usual. During lunch, I went to the cafeteria. Richard was already there. He was sitting at the corner table. He had a sandwich and a bottle of water. Diane was sitting across from him. They were talking. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but Diane laughed at something. Richard smiled. I bought a salad. I sat 2 tables away. I ate slowly. Diane stood up first. She waved at Richard and left. Richard remained. He finished his sandwich. He checked his phone. He stood and threw his trash away. He walked past my table. He said hello. I said hello back. When I returned to the office, I checked Diane's sent mail. I searched for any mention of Richard's name in the past month. 0 results. I checked Martin's shared folder. He keeps notes on recurring tasks. Some of them reference other staff. I searched the folder for Richard's name. No matches. I opened a document I knew Martin had written. It was a procedural guide for handling expired permits. I had watched Martin and Richard collaborate on it. Richard had suggested an entire section about compliance reporting. Martin had typed it. I had reviewed the draft. I opened the guide. The section was there. It was clearly written. It followed Richard's suggestion exactly. The document history listed only Martin as the author. No additional contributors. No comments. No revision notes from anyone else. I printed the guide. I walked to Martin's desk. I asked him if he remembered working on it with anyone. He looked up. He said he wrote it himself. He said it took a few days. He asked if something was wrong with it. I said no. I said it was clear. I thanked him. I walked back to my desk. I placed the printed guide in my drawer. Richard was at the copier. He was scanning a form. The machine beeped softly. He waited. He collected the output. He returned to his desk. I opened the time-off calendar. It shows requested leave and approved absences. Richard had submitted a vacation request 4 months ago. I remembered because it overlapped with a busy week. We had discussed coverage. Diane had agreed to take 2 of his special cases. I had agreed to take the rest. I searched the calendar for his name. No entries. I filtered by date. I went back 6 months. Nothing. But the busy week had still been noted. There was a note in the shared task log. It said extra coverage required. It listed additional assignments for Diane and me. It did not explain why coverage was needed. I checked my own email from that week. I found the message I had sent confirming I would handle the extra workload. The message did not mention Richard. It did not mention why the workload existed. It simply confirmed I would manage it. I closed my email. I looked at Richard. He was reading something on his screen. His posture was relaxed. His coffee mug was nearly empty. I returned to the reconciliation report. I opened the raw data file. It pulls from the activity database. Every action in the system generates a timestamp, an operator ID, and a task code. I filtered by last week. I sorted by operator. 3 operators. I added a column. I displayed session duration. Richard works 6-hour days. He takes a lunch break. He works steadily. I can track his rhythm by the sound of his keyboard. There were no sessions that matched his schedule. I checked the printer log. It records every print job by user ID. Last week, Richard printed at least 4 documents. I had seen him do it. The log listed 3 users. I stood. I walked to the window. I stayed there for several minutes. When I returned, Richard was putting on his jacket. It was nearly 5. He said goodnight to Diane. He said goodnight to Martin. He looked at me. He said goodnight. I said goodnight. He left. I waited. I opened the access log. 3 exits logged. Martin, Diane, me. The next morning, I arrived early. The office was empty. I made coffee. I sat at my desk and opened the system. Richard's name was not in the operator list. I had expected this. I checked the intake queue. There were 8 new applications. The system had distributed them automatically overnight. 3 to Martin, 3 to Diane, 2 to me. The distribution was even. The workload was balanced. The system had functioned without issue. I opened the first application. It was a commercial zoning variance. I reviewed the attached documents. I cross-referenced the property code. I approved it. The system logged the action under my operator ID. I moved to the second application. Martin arrived at 8:03. He greeted me. He sat down. He began working. Diane arrived at 8:12. She said good morning. She turned on her computer. She opened her queue. Richard arrived at 8:09. I did not check the access log. I knew what it would say. Richard hung his jacket on the back of his chair. He sat down. He logged in. His screen populated. He opened a folder. He began typing. I continued processing my queue. At 9:30, there was a staff meeting. We gathered in the small conference room. Martin brought his notebook. Diane brought her tablet. I brought nothing. Richard was there. He sat in his usual seat by the window. Our supervisor reviewed the week's priorities. She mentioned a backlog in commercial permits. She asked if anyone needed additional support. No one responded. She thanked us. She dismissed the meeting. Richard stood. He returned to his desk. I watched him sit down. I watched him resume typing. I opened the meeting notes document. It auto-generates from the calendar invite. It lists attendees based on acceptance status. 3 names. Martin, Diane, me. Richard had been in the room. He had been sitting 3 feet from the supervisor. She had looked in his direction twice while speaking. The document did not include him. I closed the file. I returned to my queue. At 11 o'clock, I received a call from the zoning office. They needed clarification on a permit that had been processed last month. They referenced a case number. I pulled it up. The case had been handled by Richard. I remembered because it required coordination with 2 other departments. Richard had managed the entire process. It had taken 3 days. I opened the case file. The approval was listed. The documents were attached. The timeline was complete. No operator ID was associated with it. The caller asked who had processed it. I told them I would need to check. I put them on hold. I reviewed the file again. Every required field was filled. Every signature was in place. Every step had been completed in the correct order. There was no record of who had done it. I returned to the call. I told them the case had been processed according to standard procedure. I confirmed the details they needed. They thanked me. They hung up. I stared at the case file for a long time. Richard had worked on this. I had seen him on the phone. I had seen him print the interdepartmental forms. I had seen him walk them to the third floor. The system showed the work complete. It did not show Richard. I minimized the window. I thought about the reconciliation reports. I thought about the operator registry. I thought about the access logs and the printer history and the email chains that no longer mentioned his name. I thought about Martin's belief that he had written the procedural guide alone. I thought about the vacation request that had never been recorded but had still required coverage. The system was not correcting itself. It was not redistributing Richard's work. It was not replacing him. It was continuing. Richard's tasks were completed. His cases were closed. His responsibilities were met. I looked at Richard. He was reviewing a renewal application. His expression was neutral. His movements were deliberate. He worked the same way he always had. I closed the case file. I returned to my own queue. That afternoon, Diane asked me to review a compliance checklist. I walked to her desk. Richard was standing near the filing cabinet. He was holding a folder. Diane pointed to a line on her screen. She asked if the phrasing was correct. I read it. I said it was fine. She thanked me. I returned to my desk. Richard filed the folder. He returned to his chair. I opened my email. I began drafting a response to a contractor. Halfway through, I stopped. I deleted the draft. I opened the operator registry again. 3 names. I opened the reconciliation report. 3 operators. I opened the access log. 3 badges. I closed all of them. Richard was still there. He was still working. The system was still operating. The next day followed the same pattern. I arrived. I opened the system. The queue populated. 3 names appeared. The work moved steadily. Applications were processed. Approvals were issued. Cases closed. Nothing prompted review. The following day was the same. And the day after that. By midweek, the rhythm felt routine again. I no longer paused before opening reports. I completed tasks as they appeared. The system responded. The queue cleared. The day ended. I had been checking the logs because I expected correction. I expected acknowledgement. I expected some form of error or flag. I stopped expecting it. I leaned back in my chair. The hum of the lights continued. The sound of typing continued. The phone rang at the front desk. I stopped checking. Friday arrived. I ran the reconciliation report. 3 operator IDs. I reviewed the weekly activity. I closed the report. I filed it. The afternoon passed without interruption. The queue emptied earlier than usual. I reviewed the remaining items. I closed each window in order. The office stayed quiet. Richard said good night to Diane. He said good night to Martin. He looked at me. He said good night. I said good night. He left. I gathered my things. I turned off my monitor. I walked to the door. The office was clean. The queue was clear. The week was complete. I scanned my badge. The door unlocked. I stepped through. The system would generate Monday's assignments overnight. It would distribute the workload. It would continue. I did not think about whether Richard's name would appear. I already knew it would not.